If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers Podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Studio 26 and the Interesting B2B Marketers Podcast. I'm joined by Andy. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. All right. So as we always do, we're going to jump in with a quick 60-second intro about your background, and then we'll jump into the case study. So tell us about who you are.
Sounds good. I'm one of the co-founders of Orbit Media Studios. Orbit is a web development company founded here in Chicago 22 years ago. Today, we're a team of 53 specialists across all different, project management, design, programming, support, strategy. So I've been an SEO for 22 years. I've done a couple of decades of website visitor psychology, research and analysis. I have access to 500 plus Google Analytics accounts, and I've been part of like 1,000 plus website projects, quite a few.
Awesome. I can feel the good and bad tension of any website review going over into the thousands. Those are all unique and they all have their own challenges. But let's do this. Let's jump into the first case study. You're going to share one about a staffing company as it relates to doing a website redesign. So take it away.
Yeah. So Bay Area staffing company, kind of a hot category. Even now, not doing bad, but there are lots of tech firms there that are doing things like building prototypes, not just for software, but for hardware. And this is a company that can pull together diverse groups of people, of specialists and teams that can be sort of deployed as a unit in a lab or in a product development team. So well-established firm, very sales-driven go-to-market strategy. They know all the companies, they're building deepening relationships, but how to grow without having the clients, how to find new clients because they are already kind of saturated in their big players. I mean, they work with Google and Facebook and PayPal and all kinds of different businesses. So search is about discovery. Search will add to the pipeline. Search will grow the awareness for their brand. The problem was the existing site wasn't built with search in mind at all. So, Steve, this is one of those classic examples of simply building a site that has some sensitivity to keywords and to relevance and to, a page per phrase, a page per service. So really, this was some pretty low-hanging fruit, but the results are dramatic. 46% increase in traffic to those high-value commercial intent pages just by thinking in advance. The real takeaway here is that sites are either built with search in mind or they're not. You've got a page called services and it's about all of your services. That page isn't relevant to any specific service. So this was really about just building out the generic pages into small sections of keyword focused pages. I mean, it's not uncommon for website projects to be sufficient to have a big impact on search traffic without any other activity, just because there's lots of URLs targeting lots of phrases and the content on them has lots of detail on that topic.
Yeah. Do you find, I imagine that every website is a little bit different because someone in an organization owns it. And sometimes it's brand, sometimes it's content, sometimes it could be SEO or parts of it might be SEO. Do you find that as like your first challenge in any project is to understand who owns it because that is going to have a dramatic effect on how they think and structure it?
Yeah, if you work backwards from the ideal outcome, qualified visitor lands on web page because they saw something good in search results and clicked it, because that company or that page ranked in search for that phrase. So if it's going to work well, regardless of who the owner is or what their domain expertise is, you have to have URLs that are relevant to specific topics. Now, how does that align or misalign with different roles? I love your question. Brand, not always really keyword focused, not always thinking about how to reverse engineer demand. They're thinking more about the big picture and the story and the strategy and what wins the sales conversation. Very important for conversions, but sometimes those people tend to deprioritize search. Other marketers, maybe a little bit overly focused on search. People who have a background in pay-per-click, maybe they're just they over-index on this keyword stuff. There's more to it than rankings. You're trying to convert a visitor. So it's a great question. We've seen it work all different ways, but ultimately somebody needs to be willing to do the upfront research and then during copywriting to make some of the little compromises or to adapt the content and keyword targeting a little bit. When those things combine, it works very well.
Yeah. Do you recommend, is there a one-size-fits-all approach or is it best to say, you know what, there are certain parts of the website that need to do a lot of storytelling. Some might be more long-term SEO-driven pages. Like, is there a hybrid model? What do you suggest?
Well, it's not true that every page is a keyword opportunity. So you're really, right there on the nose. That's it exactly. The About page doesn't need any keyword targeting at all. That page is not optimized to rank for any specific phrase. Just look at any URL and ask, like, someone trying to find this would search for what? And there's lots of pages on the internet that no one's trying to find. They're doing other jobs. That's normal. That's fine. So no, the home page is typically a good keyword opportunity. It's the page that has the greatest authority, therefore the greatest ranking potential. So you can target the most competitive key phrase on the home page. This is why home is the all-time worst title tag for a home page. Please use your business categories, your homepage title tag, and header text. That way you at least got your best competitor in the toughest competition. And then all of those top level interior pages can target often, the commercial intent key phrases. In other words, the names of your services as described by your audience, right? In my experience, people don't really search for solutions. The only people who use the word solutions are people who sell stuff.
Yep.
I've hundreds of hours of keyword research in my career. I've never seen the word solutions appear. People don't search for solutions. I don't need it. My sink's leaking. I don't need a plumbing solution. Honey, we need a plumbing solution. Like, nobody's ever said that.
Yeah.
And then those deeper interior pages can target the more specific phrases. Some of those don't have to be in the main navigation. They can be off nav pages, but that's step one in SEO strategy.
Yeah. So for this client, we mentioned redesign, but what's the balance between all right, there's a big concerted effort for a redesign push versus now this is an ongoing thing if you really want to do a good job. How did you balance that for this client?
The blunt way to put it is that search is a job that's never really done. There's no such thing as like finishing SEO in a way, because there's going to be new content and new pages published on that topic, whatever key phrase you're targeting. There's going to be more competition coming along here before long. And algorithms change, although that doesn't affect search rankings as much in my experience as people think. So it is sometimes efficient or sufficient to just make a page that targets the phrase, and that page ranks and can rank for a long period of time. But if you're ever unsatisfied with your performance in search, then that just means you're not done yet. You have to go back, look at that page, see what it's currently performing for, ask if you've really sharpened the focus on that as their keyword to target. If not, maybe adjust the keyword targeting. If it is a good keyword for that page, then you need to add depth to that. Go big on the details, answer all the related questions, touch on all the related subtopics. So it's really just a matter of revolution, rebuild the website. If you're not done yet, if you're not ranking yet, if you're not attracting qualified visitors yet, then you move to evolution, which is that ongoing battle of just continuously improving pages. It's fun when it works well. It's like a sport, and analytics are your scoreboard.
Yep. Yeah. So for this client, were they already there philosophically with you, or was it a bit of a pushback? Because I imagine some clients are all about, nope, we're going to do the redesign. We're going to need you guys for like 30 days and then we can part ways. How were they to work with?
Well, this is an example of a client that had a lot of business success and evidence that their current go-to-market strategy was working. So they're selling and they're successful as such. So we didn't have to put a ton of prioritization on search. They were okay with us doing SEO as we planned and built the pages, but they didn't feel like they weren't overly detail oriented on the construction of these pages. They let us do the job that we had planned to do. And that was nice because there are clients that are poorly suited to get search results performance in SEO because they're unwilling to adapt their content to help it get discovered. Search is an information retrieval technology. And to have your information retrieved, you need to align it with the things that people are searching for and trying to retrieve. So there are brands that are just unwilling to make any changes to the writing to them is precious, and they don't want to change the headline. They don't want to change the brand story. They don't want to go long or deep. They want to just prioritize being sort of clever, I guess, sometimes, or they like their tagline as the header, even if that's not a keyword-focused thing. But this company was fine with all of our suggestions and just let us run the plan, and almost a 50% increase in qualified visitors post-launch. So it worked well.
That's great. What kind of time frame are we talking about for those results?
2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes that's visible within 1 month. You can't see results in less than 1 month, really, because it's not reliable. You're doing pre-post analysis. So basically going to the organic search as your default channel group in analytics and looking at the current 2 months post-launch, the 2 months pre-launch, assuming there's no seasonality in that time frame. If there is some seasonality, this is a company that has some ups or downs depending on the holidays or whatever, then you choose the year over year. So it's all a question of, in website redesigns, you're making many changes, changing the code and the design and the copy. So you really need to let it bake for a little while before you can start to do that measurement.
Yep. Makes sense. Anything else on the first case study before we jump into number 2?
No, but if there's a takeaway for anyone listening, just make sure that you've got a page per phrase. Google does not rank websites, it ranks web pages. Google's never ranked a website. URLs are what ranks. So if you're wondering why you don't rank for something, just ask yourself, do I have a page on my site that is totally focused on this topic? If not, that's your next step.
Yep. All right. Makes sense. Let's jump into case study number 2. This is a professional service company, and I'm sure you get this request, I don't know, once a month, which is we want to rank number one on Google for X. So tell us how you actually were able to achieve that for this company.
This is not an easy one to report on in a way because I was disappointed with the results of this project. They are darlings in the media. They're mentioned in the press all the time. They have original research on the site that is cited by major publications. They're on the news and on, public radio and, New York Times all the time. So they have lots and lots of links to their site. So their site has lots and lots of domain authority, as in ranking potential. Links are a huge factor in how sites rank. So because of that huge domain authority, it's like extremely high. I've done 20 years of SEO and their authority was higher than mine. They weren't even trying. They're just good at PR. So I thought, all we have to do here, authority box is checked. Now we just check the relevance box, just like the last case study. Make pages on topics, right? Target phrases, go deep into these topics. So homepage, of course, targeted the phrase, and it just sort of didn't work. It took that ideal, first a quick disclaimer. You could call that a vanity metric, ranking for one specific phrase. It may actually drive qualified visitors, but there are no pages that rank for just one phrase. Search is not really about targeting a specific key phrase. It's about targeting a topic on that page and spreading out your meaning to cover all the related phrases to you. Any page that ranks for one thing should rank for dozens of closely related things. So I squirm a bit when people tell me they want to rank for one specific phrase. That's not what the veteran SEO thinks about. That's not a senior marketer's mindset. It's just one phrase, like exact matching quotes key phrase. But I predicted it would work and it didn't, Steve. It took a long, I'm not sure, I don't know for sure why, but it took almost a year of time going back and checking that phrase and making some minor edits to the page, but they slowly climbed up from 15 to 1. It took a long time.
So that's got to be the fun part of SEO is it's a very technical understanding. The downside is what you just described, where you're doing everything that you know is to be a good thing. Do you often find that as you're sometimes you just are I don't know why this is happening. It shouldn't, but it's a little bit of a treasure hunt, I imagine.
Yeah, it's a black box. So there is no correct answer. There are best practices and there are experts, and you can talk to them and everyone will have a perspective. I've had people call me and use me as a third party neutral perspective on why something is not working. So a bunch of SEOs get on a call with me. They say, Andy, can you look at this URL? Look at this key phrase. Look at this data set. Tell me what I'm not doing here. The simplest version is to say that there's two main search criteria: authority and relevance, as in links and content. If both those boxes are checked, then you fall back on some things that get much more squishy, things for which is less research and evidence, such as user interaction. Do the visitors who click, this is fun actually, and it's important perspective, do visitors who click from Google and land on the page stay for a while? Or are they annoyed or disgusted or confused and hit the back button? That is not something that we can ever really measure because there aren't data sets large enough to find a true correlation between dwell time on page from search, and rankings, because you can't see everyone's dwell time. You'd have to have access to every website's analytics.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, a common explanation when nothing else seems to be working is that there's something wrong with the user's experience on the page. The page is not adding enough credibility. The other pages that rank are somehow more satisfying to the user's first impression. Examples of how to improve that: shorter paragraphs, more specific subheads, adding visuals, adding video, getting to the point more quickly, indicating the credibility or credentials of the author. These are things that make visitors stay on pages a bit longer. So if authority is high and relevance is strong, make the page more engaging.
I have thought that dwell time is perhaps the most confusing metric when you at least look at it in aggregate, because you think it's good. More people are spending a longer time. But then at the other side of that story, it can be, no, they're not accomplishing a task. Therefore, they're frustrated and spending more time. How do you reconcile those two different mindsets?
Well, it's similar with e-commerce and pages per visit. It's wow, this site's super engaging. The average visit has 12 pages. That's actually sometimes a sign of confusion. So there are such a thing as the Goldilocks metrics, where they shouldn't be too high, they shouldn't be too low. Dwell time, though, is probably less of a concern that way because it's only for visitors who come from search. And if time on page is very low for visitors from search, that's probably bad. Really, what we're trying to do is to keep the visitor from pogo sticking. If I see your search result, I click and I hit the back button 3 seconds later, Google recorded that, Google knows that, and Google may, if that happens enough, Google may decide this page is unsatisfying to visitors. Google's basically trying to find proxies for quality. So this is a quality. So dwell time is considered a proxy as a quality metric, and we have to do whatever we can to keep that visitor engaged, hopefully not going back to Google at all.
Yeah. The recent shift in AI and the whole theory that, well, is AI really helping people find information in a new way? I saw some data recently that said, no, we actually looked back at the last 6 months and search volume on Google has increased. That's another fascinating topic. Maybe we save that one for Q&A. But as it relates to dwell time and things like that, I'm always interested in the impact of new methods of people finding what they're looking for within solutions as opposed to just Google, which is indexing content.
Yep.
All right, let's do this. Let's jump into the third case study. This is a software company, and this one's focused on, for lack of a better word, conversion and click-through rates.
Yeah. So we're doing cheese, and now mousetrap. So if our first two case studies were about attracting qualified visitors, this one's about maximizing the percentage of visitors who take action. So if you think of conversion as a chain, and the thank you page is the last link in the chain, what percentage of people who made it to the contact form completed and went to the thank you page? What percentage of people who saw the call to action clicked and went to the contact form? So you can look at the links in this chain, use analytics and find the weakest link and try to improve them. Often, one of those important links is the calls to action on top pages, such as a homepage. This software company had a call to action at the top of their homepage that was like, see how it works, I think, something like that. And that was not a very compelling call to action. It had a very low click-through rate. So part of our job was actually, this was prior to the website relaunching. I was just doing consulting with them during the website redesign to try to maximize the impact and the benefit of the existing site. So, it said learn more. And the click-through rate on that call to action was 3.8%. To see this in analytics, you need to go to create a path exploration with the home page as the starting page path as the node and the home page as the starting point, and then watch to see what percentage of people click on each different item. You can measure the performance of your navigation and all your calls to action at a path exploration. So it said learn more, it was 3.8%. Simple suggestion, change it to sound more valuable. Who are you going to talk to? An expert. And to sound easier. What action are you taking? You're just talking to an expert. The framework for improving calls to action is to make the call to action sound more valuable or sound easier or both. People click when they've concluded that the benefit exceeds the cost. So make the benefit bigger, the cost smaller, and you can improve your click-through rates. The click-through rate jumped from 3.8 to 10.9.
Wow.
Talk to a personalization expert.
Yeah.
Schedule a time with X, chat with X, speak to X. So if X is an expert, sounds more valuable. And then the fact that a lot of CTAs are actually confusing or ambiguous, like get a demo. What do you mean, a video? Or am I going to schedule a time? Is that person going to pitch to me? So specificity correlates with conversion. And I've seen that many, many times where you just add specificity to your CTAs, especially when that specificity makes the value higher, the cost seem low.
Yeah, interesting. Do you see, I guess, two-part question here is, one is the call to action once you've found something you think works. Does that tend to translate across categories? And then the second part is, how long does that work? Because I imagine there's some element of like, well, now everyone's doing that, therefore you've ruined it for everyone, right? Everyone knows that phrase. Help us understand category and then tenure of how long something like that might work.
Yeah. The best answer for all these things, so that was an A/B test. Right now, I'm reporting on the results for a specific visitor, a specific value proposition, a specific UX, and the content around it. So in that scenario, it worked that well. So I could say like specificity is a best practice. Manipulating the ROI calculation in the visitor's brain is a best practice, right? How to improve click-through rates and calls to action. Best practices that works for other people and worked in the past. So what works for you will be different. How it works across categories is the perfect question because it varies. And the only way to really know is to actually take an action, measure it yourself because your audience is different. It's not the same. Otherwise, we'd all have the same website. Having said that, Get Started is a weirdly high-performing CTA across all categories. I don't understand why. We've done tons and tons we're always doing A/B tests here. We have hundreds of clients and we're doing optimization for a dozen of them. And Get Started is something that I would say is worth testing because for some reason, that's just seems to perform very well in our experience. I can't explain it. That's just what I'm seeing.
It's always fun to look at the data where you have a hunch, right? Like it's always good to have a hunch, but good to keep your honest with the data. And that has always been the most rewarding part of any performance-driven marketing effort is the big reveal. It feels good to be right sometimes, but it also feels good to be humbled and completely wrong.
We had a new client and my early conversations, I threw out some ideas. There were 4 of them. I said any of these could make a difference. In the end, none of them made a difference. That was my just heuristic making it up thing. When we got into our process with our client, following rigor and data and validating hypotheses, that's when they started to see results. Was I disappointed? No, I actually didn't care. When they came back to me and said, Andy, none of your ideas worked, I said, so what? They were just hypotheses. So nothing to me is precious. I don't care. I don't have to be right. It doesn't matter. What matters is winning for the client in the long run by, following your, what you know to be an effective process for testing the right hypotheses. Every marketing idea is a hypothesis, and analytics is where it's validated.
Yep. All right. That makes sense. Let's do this. Let's jump into Q&A. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, tell me about your first marketing gig. What were you doing?
Well, I was not trained as a marketer and never had a job as a marketer prior to forming this company. So I got certified as a teacher. I was going to be a foreign language teacher. I got a degree in Mandarin Chinese, and then, did some other things as soon as I graduated, finished learning Chinese, and then decided to do other stuff. Now, after we started this company, 2001, I realized we can't be an outsourced partner to agencies forever. That's what we were. They hired us to do their programming, to do their animations. So instead of just, always letting us be our destiny guided by these giants around us, my first marketing gig was basically figuring out analytics and SEO to promote our own business. And it was a long road. At the time, everything was very uncertain. Google hadn't even finished winning the battle to be the dominant search engine. But I loved it. And, Google Analytics wasn't even a product yet. We used Urchin and Web Trends. But I had so much fun when I realized this is kind of a game. It's kind of a sport. It's really motivating. It's not just about opinions and emotion. I can actually try something and see my input and see the output and then iterate. So it was about 2 more years before we started creating our own pipeline. Today we spend nothing on advertising, and we're a $7 million a year business. And, I haven't done outsourced project work in many years.
Yeah, that's great. What do you like about what you do the most? I mean, is it the ever changing field? You've got big companies changing platforms and trying to do a better job at helping the users. What gets you excited?
Well, as a content marketer, this is the last 15 years, it's been a hardcore content marketing strategy. I'm motivated to teach. And as I said, that's kind of the full circle story in my life. I'm sort of still a teacher. So what I get excited by is learning something useful. I remember when I realized oh, this is how to track video views using Google Analytics, and then quickly teaching it, learning it well enough to be able to make the deck, shoot the video that shows it. So I love to see the light bulb moment when I do during presentations. There's a lot of people when you say to them best practices are just good hypotheses. Wow. That's a moment of insight, and you helped someone. A lot of marketers are still thinking best practices are rules, or they must be followed, or don't break them. But when people realize that, oh, they really are, a best practice is just a good hypothesis. So that's what I find to be the most fun, the most interesting, is to learn something useful and teach it. It makes it hard. I just had to learn everything again in GA4. Right now I'm updating all of my tactics to align with AI because it's very, very powerful and quite useful. So it's hard work. I lose a lot of sleep because I have to get up early and write. I have little kids and I don't compromise their family time. But that to me is the most fun, is to teach.
Yeah. What gets you most frustrated?
I find it difficult to align with marketers and team members who are really biased toward their own views and opinions. And I'm always looking for diplomatic ways to remind people that what they just told me is their personal preference and has nothing to do with the target audience. It's not about, achieving a result. And we can teach this to every client. Right? It's I appreciate that perspective. I like that color too. But what we're really trying to do here is to maximize qualified leads through traffic and conversions, adding clarity, removing friction, keyword focus, adding evidence. So I get a little bit frustrated now. I'm in my 50s, repeatedly explaining to people that although I respect their opinions, we should stay focused on the target audience and on our research into what their needs are. That for me I'm not getting better at that. It's still hard for me. Why do I have to keep telling these people one at a time and educate every client one at a time that this is not the way to do good marketing?
I remember I used to work for a big agency, and we would do these large website rebuilds, and my job was the account lead essentially. So I got to staff the team, and UX was just starting to become mainstream. And I'm I need someone with a really good UX perspective to be on this. And she was amazing at doing what you just said, which is it's not about our brand and our story. It's about putting yourself in the customer's shoes. And I really feel that whole practice, I mean, UX has been around for a long time, right? But it was just formalized in more job titles recently. But that field has just done so much for content and SEO because they just slap you into submission in a good way of like, no, 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 no. You have to think about it in the correct way. And I've seen that do wonders for website projects that may have checked all the boxes on design and brand, but just did not do anything to really be a good steward of the site when it came to whether it was lead gen or creating content that needed to help a user accomplish a task.
I have ways of teaching this. It's like clear is more important than clever. I have tools that help clients see this by using like a usability hub 5-second test. We put in the client's very clever tagline as the header, and you put in a very specific keyword focused user focused header, and you show these two things to a focus group. 25 people see this one, 25 people see this one, or you do 50 and 50, whatever. And the client understands, because the question, what does this company do? Nobody can tell what your company does. They literally fail the 5-second test. A simpler way to explain this is like the backyard barbecue test. And this is only for one element, the homepage headline. If I met you at a backyard barbecue and I say, what do you do for a living? And you read to me the headline on your homepage, would I know what you do for a living? Or would I be confused? Would I have to ask subsequent questions? Are you being overly clever? So the first question of every visitor to every website is, am I in the right place? And to meet their information needs, which is our job if you're building a website, is to be specific and descriptive in the homepage header.
Yeah. I'm going to focus on the next question about original research. And I know that your company has done blogger studies in the past, right? And I think the thing with so many content marketers is they feel the pressure of, I have to write original content and it's perspective. And they always think, I just have to write. I have to be a journalist. And I wanted you to take us through that shift of sometimes it's just sourcing original data and that becomes what makes the content very interesting. So tell us about when you started doing surveys as a means to kind of get to better content.
Yeah, it's a bit of a myth to say like what the content marketer does is right. I think of it as our job is to develop content that starts a conversation or becomes visible in search or gets a lot of engagement in social or email or whatever. So the things that work there are not necessarily just writing long form content. Visuals are as important. Right? I try to never write an article that doesn't have something of visual interest at every scroll depth. So there's a famous quote from Eugene Schwartz. This is, copywriting legend from decades ago. Copy's never written, it's assembled. So I think of it that way. I'm building these things, right? I'm constructing them. So contributor quotes, highly formatted content, lots of visuals. Yes, I'm writing something, but that's really maybe a third of my total time. Original research checks a bunch of these boxes almost automatically. Surveys are the toughest ones to do because you have to promote them twice, once to get respondents to your survey and once after the post is live. But surveys are magical because you can get data that would be otherwise impossible to get. I did a survey about a year ago. I'm going to try to repeat it. Do you get spam text messages? I'm trying to start a conversation. I'm taking a stand on marketing. I'm saying certain types of marketing are unethical or negative. And I got data points on this. The blogger survey, even better example. How much time does it take to write a blog post? Can't answer that question without a survey. How long is your typical blog post? Are you adding videos? How many images do you add? Do you work with contributors? Like all these things. So in the end, your site is categorically different forever. Your site is the primary source for new information. If I was doing a content audit for anybody, I'd ask them, is your website the primary source for any information? In other words, if you publish something that's unique to you, or you added to the internet, you made something that not everybody could make, you were the only one. So it is a magical source it's a magical format for content in its ability to drive engagement in social, to get mentions, to drive links and authority, to power PR efforts. Journalists love it. It opens up all kinds of interesting contributor quote ideas or collaborator ideas. Ask influencers to contribute or give you perspective on one of the data points. So there are research pieces on my site that have been linked to from thousands of other websites, making me sort of invincible in SEO. Very hard to compete with me now. And that I just continue to get mentioned all the time. So if I had to recommend one thing to differentiate content strategy, it would be that: publish original research.
All right, we're going to do two more questions. The first one is going to be on talent. So you've built a really successful company. Talent is a huge part of that. What do you see as people early on in their career who are they're molded right? Like, what are they bringing to the table where you can identify someone and go, that person is going to do really well in this type of environment?
Well, two of the skills that really differentiate a marketer are search and analytics, partly because they're just categories where most people switch off or weren't motivated to learn those things. They got into marketing because they wanted to be creative. They love storytelling or something. They're just not that focused on search or analytics. Even if that's not what you do in your career as a marketer, if you're just, digital marketing specialist moving up through, an organization, those things are awesome things to have in your background because you'll have another perspective all the time. If you understand how search works, you're looking at a list of headlines. Happens, we do it all the time. you're going to know which of those has an advantage in search. If you have a background in analytics, you're going to know that idea being presented is, what metric it would impact, right? Like adding video to a page. What would that do? Well, that should increase dwell time on page, engagement rate, and then plus the YouTube studio metrics. Okay. Now you're going to be much more valuable to your organization because you can bring that data-driven measurement marketer perspective to all the meetings. You're going to be the one who they lean on and ask for help and look this up. You're going to properly frame every idea that you have for the rest of your career as a hypothesis. So those are the two things that I think there's more of a shortage on those, and those people are just better positioned to drive impact.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. This is my Barbara Walters question. You're looking back at yourself, maybe when you started your company or a long time ago. What are some things that you've looked back and said, you know what? I had it wrong. I would do that differently now because it didn't work, or there's a better approach that I've used. What are some things that you look back on your career and kind of can grow from?
I eventually figure things out, but I'm not very fast. I should have done long-form detailed content sooner. I should have done collaborations and influencer marketing sooner. I should have been active on social media years sooner. I should have gone deep into video and started publishing how-to videos years sooner. Original research, I should have done that sooner. Offering SEO as a service to complement the web development, should have started doing that years sooner. I was just a little bit slow to see the trend and to adopt the technology. I remember thinking like, why do I want to be on social media? There's already enough ways to contact me and my inbox is a mess. I don't want another inbox. It sounds terrible. But my friends who were active at those times, they have massive reach now, hundreds of thousands, because we were all right there, right? We saw it all emerge, and what were we doing? We could have had a huge, very large audience on YouTube if I just published some of these things as videos, 5 years before I did. But it all works out, Steve. I don't have any regrets.
Yeah. All right. I like that. Well, Andy, thanks for joining us on the show today. I enjoyed the conversation, and thank you to the listeners for watching another show. Just as a reminder, you can download everything on Apple, on Spotify, and we archive everything on the 26 Characters website. So thank you again, Andy, and thank you guys for hanging around for another podcast. Look forward to having you back for the next one. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.